Welcome to Living in Color. I'm your host, Farah Nasser, and today we're talking about ways to discuss racism and diversity with children. At what age should you begin talking to them about race? Why is it important to have these conversations early on, and more? Today I'm joined by Yashy Murphy, who is a writer and content creator for babyandlife.com, as well as Brandon Hay, who is the founder of Black Daddies Club. Welcome to you, Yashy and Brandon.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Let's get right into this and start by talking about when you think parents should approach the discussion of race and racism. Brandon, I'll start with you.
I think as babies are coming into their consciousness, right? Like questions are coming up. But I think that's like the perfect time to start having conversations when if you have a boy or girl and like you're playing with Barbies, for example, and you're seeing that like, the dark Ken and the white Ken. It's like a good time to have conversations around differences. And also one of the things I did with my kids was like insert the names in baby stories or create baby stories or bedtime stories just so that they could see themselves or hear themselves and picture themselves in a positive light. Because commercials, media, it's depicting especially black boys in a very negative light. So it's important. We saw it was important that we had conversations to kind of flip that and show a positive side of their blackness.
We talk to kids about colors from when they were babies, right? What color is this toy? What color is your shirt? So the concept of color came in pretty early, and for us, the conversation took place, I think she was about 3 years old when my daughter asked, what color am I? And we used that opportunity to talk about race, colors, culture, diversity, but she was 3, right? So it was really lighthearted conversations, and I think the most important thing is to have continuous conversations so that we can evolve with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. My kid would, my oldest is 6, and he would say, the brown-looking kid over there, but not realizing he's also a brown-looking kid over here. He didn't mean it in a racist way, but just kids sort, right? So they sort out. So they, like you say, they pick up colors, size, shape, whatever, and it's in an innocent way. I gave you one example of how I've brought it up. What are some of the ways you two have brought it up to your kids in terms of explaining to them that people still aren't treated equally when it comes to race?
I mean, for my sons, I have 3 beautiful black boys, 17, 15, and 13. And talking about race has been important, but also talking about gender, right? So with my son, like I'm using mediums like the news. So when Trayvon Martin, like that, for us, that was a really necessary conversation that we had to have. So it wasn't just talking about the birds and bees, but was talking about like situations that can definitely affect any of my 3 black boys. But then also when my eldest son was turning 14, I took him to go see Moonlight. And then afterwards we had a conversation about, like we had something to eat and we talked about I asked him, like, what is black masculinity to you? And he was like, it's a performance. And for me, that was like super rewarding. For me, it showed that he was way more developed. Yeah, he was way more developed than I was at 14 or even my early 20s, right? But I think it's having these honest dialogue and using mediums, whether it's like film or YouTube, to like break in like really tough discussions that's age appropriate.
Actually, our kids are both younger, so how would you explain it to your young kids? Books? Is there anything?
So yes, definitely using books and movies, but more often than not, I like to use everyday situations that they're familiar with, and especially when the topic of race is concerned. We live in downtown Toronto. It's a very diverse city, and what we do between our travels and local living is that we try to attend the festivals. We try to take part in culinary trails and visit museums, and then use those opportunities to bring up topics that they can kind of understand a little bit, and so that later on in life we can have more sophisticated conversations.
And I'll ask you this next question. You answer it how you want, because your kids eventually might watch this broadcast. But tell us about any situations that you've personally experienced in terms of your kids facing any discrimination, and how you handled it, if you're comfortable with that.
My kids are still young. They are 5 and 7. So as far as I am aware, they haven't, I should say. But it's something that we are conscious of, my husband and I. So we ask them, how was school? And what we realize is that their friends may say something that they don't necessarily would consider to be racism. So we're focusing on how did that make you feel?
Right.
What did this make you feel? So far, we haven't. So, but I think as they get older,
Right,
it'll be a bit
right.
different.
Yeah, tell us.
I think it's interesting, right? I think anti-black racism it's steeped into systemic stuff. So like, even in just like preschool or in, you know, their day-to-day experience, like a lot of their teachers are not from the community, don't look like them. So they're, you know, had a conversation with my black boys from early that, listen, when you guys are young, they're gonna see you as cute, and then as you sort of grow up, and that was the first, that was what we noticed early. It was like, when my sons or any other black boys, and black girls as well, would do anything that their white counterparts were doing, that was a normal part of their development, the response was a lot different.
Like what?
It was, you know, there was this vigilance around being sent out of the classroom or being escalated to go to the principal's office, where there was more leniency, right? So there is, especially with black boys, there is this othering that happens, and black girls. Let's
And
be
quick. It
very
happens
quickly,
quick, right.
But even as my eldest, early this year, he went to the Northfields in my area, which is in Malvern. He went with his friend, and he was being surveilled. And he went to check out, he paid for this thing, his items. And this lady who's checking him out, which is a white woman from the same community that we live in, said, well, it's a part that we had to check your bags. And he said, okay, cool.
Like his personal bag.
It's personal bag, because you're like, this is Northfield's policy. Right. And then when he got outside, a black woman who saw the whole thing said, make sure you tell your parents what happened, because you just got racially profiled. So he told us, you know, the first thing I asked him to do was to journal about it. But the reality is that you can't, like, that's the challenge as a black father. You can't protect your kids against racism. So it's important that you have these conversations. And the journaling piece was more,
I was gonna pick up on that.
is more or less for him to sort of critically think about what's happening around him, right? So not just to take it and be like, okay, this is what it is, but critically think and ask himself questions, right? And really critically start thinking about the world that's around him. Like, if it was his white friend that went in, would the same response have happened? We don't know, right? But I think the question is, does his blackness gives him a different experience than others, and it does.
And I guess you're also having to make him aware of it more than I think many of us would for our kids. So I'm specifically talking about, you know, you said to our producer Ali when we were talking to you about this episode that just like you have to teach, you know, your kid about the birds and the bees, you have to also add in police brutality. You know,
For sure.
It's one of the things you teach them about. Yeah, tell me about that.
I think, like, you talk to any black parent, whether it's a young boy, whether a daughter or a son or whatever they want to identify as, you have to have conversations, very real conversations from early ages, how you interact with the police.
Yashy, we were talking just recently about, right now, about skin color, and you know, your daughter at 3 kind of witnessing colors.
Yep.
You did something really interesting in terms of how you explained what color she was. Originally, you told her she was peach, and then
That's
what happened?
right. So originally we said she was peach because I'm South Asian, I'm from Sri Lanka, her dad's Canadian, white. But then this past winter, she was going to school and she kind of mentioned that, you know, my friends call me brown. And she didn't seem happy about it, so I questioned, I'm like, well, you know, we just got back from Mexico, you're a couple shades darker. Right. We talked about, you know, I'm Sri Lankan, so you're half Sri Lankan. We probed a little further and found out that what she was unhappy with was the fact that her hair is brown, she fully agrees to that, but her skin color is somewhere in between. So it's neither white, neither brown. So I came up with this idea about, you know, again, taking the real life situation and putting her in there, was we went paint chip shopping, if you will. So we went to Canadian Tire and she saw this whole spectrum of colors of like the range of peaches and the ranges of brown, and she picked the color that suited her, and we said, okay, well, next time someone says, you can say, oh, I'm coffee country, or whatever it is that she was.
That's really an interesting and really smart way to handle that, and to show that there's all different colors. Like, look how many colors there are out there, right?
That's exactly it.
Even shades of the same color, as you mentioned. What would the two of you say to parents out there who might be kind of afraid to bring up race to their kids and may think it would have a negative effect right now because it might be divisive? What would you say to that, Brandon?
I think whether you're black, white, or whatever, I think, you know, as Yashy talked about and you mentioned, kids are going to ask these questions. They're going to be curious. Their questions are relevant. I think to like be honest with them, but also talk about race and diversity not from a deficit, right? And also for black parents, I know like for us, it was really having those conversations, whether it was around race or it's around gender or sexuality. When my middle son was 7, he asked us about, or he asked me specifically because I was in the car waiting for him or waiting with him. Talked about, you know, 2 guys kissing, and it was sort of having this conversation around like, you know, it's okay if they're in love, they're having this conversation, like it's okay, and different folks love differently. But in the moment, I was terrified because you recognize how important this response is, and there's no blueprint. There's no blueprint to
button, yeah.
You know, so you know, it's really being tentative and careful with the response.
Yeah, my viewpoint is very similar. We teach our kids about colors. We teach them to be kind. We tell them they need to share. In the same vein, we really need to teach them to be respectfully curious, right? So whenever they ask questions and they say the darnest things, right? Things that we wouldn't say as an adult. But what we need to remember is that those questions aren't coming from a place of judgment at this stage. So we should use that opportunity to teach them that, you know, yes, we're all different, but we're created equal, but also that life's unfair and racism does exist. So what I want to do is actually arm them with the right tools so that when they are subjected to that, they can step up and either have a conversation and question what's going around, or actually call it out if it is racism in their circles. And I need to ensure that we've laid that foundation, and not having the conversations is just doing more harm.
Yeah, this has been really helpful for me as a mother. I hope it's been helpful to other parents out there. Thank you both for sharing your stories and being so open about what you've gone through with your family. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Living in Color. Thank you for watching Living in Color. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have an idea for a future Living in Color episode, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave them in the comment section.